If Bruce Lee really could beat me in a fight, I would really
How good was Bruce Lee at fighting? Here's Jim Kelly, a decorated world karate champion, talking about how great Bruce Lee was.
There's never been anybody, in my opinion, like Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee was unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable, guys. I know who Bruce Lee sparred with.
Yeah.
They won't tell you. But I know people he sparred with. I never mention their names either. But Bruce Lee was untouchable.
Yeah.
The speed, the timing, the technique. He could spar with anybody, any size. Didn't matter what size you were.
Many people thought Bruce Lee was the best fighter of his time. Some people still think that Bruce Lee is the best fighter of all time. So much so that people still ask Mike Tyson whether Bruce Lee can beat him.
if Bruce Lee really could beat me in a fight, I would really think, fuck, this is an interesting world, because that should not happen.
Anyone that is in the real combat sports space knows that it cannot be true. A person who is untested in the ring against the best fighters cannot be the best fighter. They can be extremely talented and a proficient fighter, but a fighter that does not test himself for the world to see cannot claim to be the best. Despite any lack of proof except some hearsay about his fighting skills, Bruce was clearly very thoughtful about combat. Some consider him a genius, and his peers included the best martial artists of his time. Without a doubt, many of his philosophical and technical ideas were brilliant and well tested in the ring.
Don't think, feel.
Joe Louis, twice voted as the greatest fighter in the history of karate, the father of American kickboxing, credits Bruce Lee's fighting philosophy for winning his 11 karate championships. Bob Wall, another decorated karate champion, noted how hard Bruce Lee kicked.
And he sidekicked me so hard. I mean, Bruce hit like a mule. That in one of the scenes when he hit me, I flew back, and one of the stuntmen behind me, his arms got broken from the impact.
But how good was Bruce Lee really? Fight fans, welcome back to another episode of Striking Breakdowns. In this episode, we explore Bruce Lee's actual fighting abilities through the footage that is available. Everybody knows that Bruce Lee was a prolific human being. At only 18 years old, he won the Hong Kong Cha-Cha Championships. In the same year, he won the High School Boxing Championships in Hong Kong as well. Without much boxing experience himself, but with a ton of street fighting experience, he took out the inter-high school champion. It was a dominant performance with 3 knockdowns, and spectators talked about his unstoppable aggression and athleticism. There's no doubt Bruce Lee was a phenomenal athlete, a truly disciplined mind with real grit. But how was his technique in elite striking standards? Well, if you look at him swinging away at the heavy bag here, his techniques demonstrated would not be considered good. In fact, most coaches would probably scoff at it and consider him a beginner. Here's some clear technical mistakes he makes. He's punching from his waist without a guard. This exposes him to be easily attacked and countered. He punches and loses his stance often. This again allows an opponent to defend his attack and counter back effectively. The combinations he throws resemble a street brawler with no technique, meaning it looks like swinging haymakers and without setup. And clearly he does not think of the defense as he is hitting the bag. By today's standards in striking, Bruce would absolutely fail all technical assessments. In the boxing standard of the 1970s, which gave us the golden era of boxing, he would also not be considered as technical, not even by amateur standards. In fact, his technique resembled the technique of Jack Dempsey in the 1920s, when boxing was still in its infancy. There is no doubt, however, that he is an exceptional athlete. Just because someone doesn't have good technique does not mean they cannot fight. Jack Dempsey would still beat many heavyweight boxers today. This is why, despite Bruce Lee's poor technique by modern standards, it is plausible that he could defeat karate champions. The bulk of fighters who applaud Bruce's greatness is point karate and full contact karate champions. They were exceptional athletes in the karate and American kickboxing arena. However, the truth is these karate champions lost many of their kickboxing fights, and in sparring they would be beat up by boxers. Against the best Muay Thai fighters, they would lose much more than they would win. Bruce's sidekick though was absolutely spectacular. Look at him throwing his sidekick for example. He is able to send a heavy bag to the ceiling. His training partners even said that he trained with a 700-pound heavy bag and could send it to the ceiling. Though that is suspicious, as he sometimes failed to send this much higher heavy bag up to the ceiling. In the only footage we have of Bruce sparring, we can also examine his live fighting techniques. Bruce believes in controlling the center line, and he does so with his power hand and feet forward. That means he is right-handed and right foot dominant, but chooses to stand in southpaw with both of his dominant limbs pointed at his opponent. This is different from most striking martial arts, who place their power hand and feet at the rear. The way he hangs his arms out allows him to aim the jab directly at the opponent. The way he stands bladed allows him to point his lead foot directly at the opponent. By doing so, he is controlling the center line, and when the opponent comes in, he is immediately able to sidekick him in the head. Moments after, he is able to land his jab as his opponent comes in. Then when his opponent charges in again, he's able to land a hybrid between a hook and jab and sweep the opponent immediately. When the opponent charges in the next time, he gets hit by a lead roundhouse and a jab chain. Then for a fifth charge, he gets speared by Bruce's power jab again. From this footage, it is clear that Bruce is fast. But because his opponent is clearly not very good, it is not indicative of Bruce's skills. He loses his stance often here, and clearly showed an inability to fire the rear hand or feet to follow up the lead side. Defensively, because his rear hand is always down, he could easily be countered by someone who is actually proficient in striking. Because he is standing so bladed, a good low kicker can give him and his sidekicks a lot of trouble. Joe Louis, the great American karate champion and kickboxer, believed Bruce Lee had the speed and power to be a world-class boxer and fighter. He said Bruce is the fastest human being he ever met, and he had the inner confidence of Muhammad Ali. However, Lewis also stated that Bruce was never tested in the ring and his ability to take a hit was never shown. In my opinion, Bruce had all the right mechanisms in place to be a world-class fighter. A great athlete, incredible discipline, great heart, and surrounded by world-class fighters. But the fact is, potential unproven is just that, potential. Bruce is a great martial artist, and his contributions in the industry is undeniable. But it's also important to recognise him for what he is. Bruce is a great athlete, movie star, and philosopher, but not a great fighter.
I said empty your mind. Be formless, shapeless, like water.
Real great fighters prove themselves in the ring, and those who do deserve the claim of being the best fighter. What do you think about Bruce Lee's fighting ability? Thank you for watching this episode. By doing so, you've kept our channel alive. If you enjoyed it, please watch another episode of Striking Breakdowns. I'm Lawrence Kenshin, and have a wonderful new year.